going to start with talking about the purpose of the assessment. I do want to have one disclaimer as I begin. I know that we're going to be talking about an assessment process to receive general mental health services. I know that sometimes some of you your children have gone through psychological testing, which is sometimes called an assessment. And I don't want you to get confused between the two. I'm not going to be talking about psychological testing, which is something I've spent many years doing psychological testing myself, which is when we're trying to typically understand a diagnosis better, or when cases are stuck and they're very complex, sometimes psychological testing can be helpful. There are aspects of what I'm going to be talking about that overlap with psych testing, but I'm not specifically going to be addressing psychological testing today. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them through the Whova Q&A, or you can contact me and we can chat, but I just wanted to make that disclaimer. All right. So assessment, why do we need an assessment in order to get services, right? Mental health services. So here's kind of three broad reasons that we need an assessment, right? Sometimes the assessment process helps everybody involved gain an understanding, share their perspectives, and gain an understanding of what's really going on. And what we're trying to understand are what are the challenges that your child and you are facing, and what are the supports that are in place, okay? Now, what might be surprising to some of you, or maybe not because this happened to you, when I've done assessments with families, sometimes surprises are revealed in an assessment setting. It's not unusual, for example, for a child to say something that you didn't know about, for your child to say something like, you know, sometimes I skip class maybe once a week and I go smoke weed with my friends. And you look at your child and you're like, what the heck? Like, I didn't know that, right? Or they might say something like, I think about killing myself almost every day, and you had no idea, right? Because sometimes the impact of their thinking, this kind of thinking, or these behaviors hasn't revealed itself yet in terms of other parts of their life, right? So it's good sometimes to talk about things with when there's someone sort of guiding the process, because it reveals some things that you may not have known. An assessment also is supposed to highlight the context in which the challenges that brought you into seeking help. What is that context, right? What have you tried before that has worked, and why is it not working now, right? This is going to help us also understand how best to approach supporting you in addressing the challenges, right? As families, we're always making adjustments and adapting to whatever comes our way, right? Children grow and change every day. Our family circumstances grow and change every day. Sometimes we don't even know that what we're dealing with is unusual, or you know, something that not every family deals with, right? So when we talk about changes and how you cope, it's not because we're trying to find out what you're doing wrong. It's because we're just trying to find out, how is it that families cope? How has your particular family coped? What's worked and what hasn't? And finally, the reason we do an assessment is because it guides that process of care, right? It helps us understand what's going on and what we have available to us that might be helpful to you and your family. And I said that in a particular way because sometimes we don't have the full array of potential services that could help your child available to us. So we need to understand what's going on, what do we have available, and try to match that as best we can, right? The information that is shared and asked about in assessment helps determine, as you heard from Dr. Israel yesterday, diagnosis. It helps determine level of care. And it also helps us understand how to specifically put that treatment plan together. Okay, so what is it that goes into an assessment? Okay, what are the things that could happen in an assessment, for example? Okay, one of the obvious things are interviews. Okay, you might be interviewed as a family. You might also be given an opportunity to be interviewed as individuals, right? As mom, dad, other caregivers. Depending on how old your child is, there also probably be an opportunity for your child to talk alone with the assessor, right? What we're trying to understand as assessors are first of all, what are the circumstances that brought you in? What are the challenges you're facing? And then we want to understand in a broad way what's happening with your child, their health, their educational progress, and how they're functioning in different aspects of their lives. Because this will help us really understand the impact of the challenges and how and maybe what intensity of services could be helpful to them. You might be given checklists and questionnaires to fill out. Okay, hopefully you're not handed a cans to fill out. I'll talk more about that in a second. But sometimes you're given checklists and questionnaires, right? You might be given a trauma symptom checklist or something about just what behaviors have you seen in your child lately. Sometimes questionnaires are given to young people to answer when they're old enough. Sometimes they're just given to parents. Sometimes questionnaires are given to teachers or other important people, which gets us into the other section of checking in with other important people. Okay, children are supported by a lot of people in their lives, right? School-age children, at least pre-COVID, spent a lot of time in school, right? Right now, some of your kids may be in hybrid situations. Hopefully, in Idaho, kids are back in school, but they spend a lot of time in school. And so we need to understand what's happening in those environments when we as parents aren't around. So the assessor might want to talk to school personnel if they're involved in sports, their coaches. If you are active in church, some of the church folks that work with your child, if they're in piano. So the other people that are involved, extended family, they'll want to really understand a full picture of what's going on with your child. And if they're involved with other professionals, right? Their primary care physician, their pediatrician, if they're involved in other types of professional services. And finally, in Idaho, right, the assessment involves the CANs. And the CANs will help to organize this information. I'm going to go into depth about the CANs in a few slides down the road, but I just wanted to give a kind of a broad sense of what goes into an assessment and why it's so extensive.